Right, good afternoon. Good afternoon all, and welcome to today's meeting of the Adults Communities Overview Scrutiny Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live via YouTube, and it will be available for viewing after the meeting. And could I just take the opportunity to welcome anyone who might be watching live as we speak. The first item on the agenda are minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of November 2023. I propose that the minutes held of the meeting are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Are you all in agreement? Thank you. Agenda item 2, question time. I've received no questions from members of the public. Agenda item 3, questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. I've received no questions from members. Agenda item 4, to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent. I've not been notified of any urgent items. Agenda item 5 is declaration of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Does any member have a declaration to make? No, thank you all. Then we have agenda item 6, which is declarations of the party whip in accordance with overview of scrutiny procedure rule 16. I believe no such declarations have been received. Thank you. Agenda item 7, presentation of petitions under Standing Order 35. Again, no petitions have been received. So we now move on to the substantive reports there, of which the first one is probably the most important at this time of year, which is agenda item 8. On today's agenda is the report on the Council's medium-term financial strategy, 2024-5 to 2027-28, as set out in pages 13 to 38 of the agenda pack. Clearly, this is going to be in the very capable hands of John Wilson as the Director of Adults Communities, and I'd also take the opportunity to welcome Christine Radford and Ted, who are here from the members, Christine being the portfolio holder, and we also have Judy Spence here, who's the guru of finance. Doesn't say that here, I've just made it up. But I wrote the word guru, so it's good enough for me. I think really, John, I don't know if you want to say a few words. I mean, obviously all members would have read the report, but you just might want to highlight certain areas which you feel that you want to reinforce and the public watching might be more interested in.
Thank you, Chair. So as you said, it's the MTFS report for 24-25, and obviously these reports will be scrutinised by the various scrutiny committees over the course of the month, prior to the report going to Cabinet and then full Council. The report just starts off with a nod to the Adult Social Care Strategy and the fact that the MTFS has been developed in line with the strategy of the department and the Council's corporate strategy. The only thing to say there is this is the final year of that strategy, so we'll be working on a new strategy from 25 onwards, which will clearly be developed with cognizance of the overall financial position of the Council. The paragraph 10 of the report.
Sorry, John, before you carry on, if I'm perhaps I may cut in, what we would normally do is we have members would have received an agenda item of how we normally go through the MTFS, which we take in sections. Sorry, John, I thought you just got a few words overview, which you did very nicely. So members would have got this. So we normally go through it in blocks. So the first blocks we're looking at are service transformation, which is paragraphs 5 to 9, pages 13 and 14, and the proposed revenue budget, other changes and transfers, paragraphs 10 to 16, pages 14, 15, and Appendix A on page 31. So really just anything on paragraphs 5 to 15, John, 16.
Paragraph 10 details the budget for 24-25 through to 27-28. As you'll see within the table in paragraph 10, the starting position for the 24-25 budget is the £208,000. With the growth added in and the savings taken off, that leaves a budget position of 225,885 for 24-25. Obviously, that doesn't include any price or pay inflation, which is held in the central contingency and will be added to the budget when the budget is set. Paragraph 12 just outlines how that 225, did I say 1,000?
You did, yeah.
Sorry, that 225 million.
You did. I was going to correct you. I thought we've got it cheaper this year.
Yeah, no. 225 million is set out. The detail of that is set out in paragraph 12. And then paragraph 13 just outlines the budget transfers that were made as part of the 23-24 budget, which were over and above the budget that was set through the MTFS. And as you can see there, that's how we add in the pay and the inflation to the budget. So I think I can probably just stop there, Chair.
Thank you, John. So that's the first section, and we've established it's 225 million. 225,000 would have been nice, might have given us a bit of a surplus, but Judith is looking disappointed at this point. But has anyone got any questions for John on those sections? Joel?
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to draw members' attention to the table on paragraph 10, and the first column where the proposed growth is a substantial amount, £24 million, just over. But if you then read further down, 15 million of that, or 50 million plus of that, is for inflation contingencies. Is that correct?
No, it's not. So the £24 million worth of growth is all demand pressure. So it's all demographic growth and demand and other demands, which we'll come on to when we get to the growth section. But the inflation is added in addition to the 225.
Thank you very much. I stand corrected. But the inflation figure is about £15 million, I saw in the report.
There's a figure in the report, I think, under paragraph 13, which details £15 million for price inflation. That relates to the 23-24 year. So the 24-25 inflation hasn't yet been determined, because we'll look at what the underlying rate of inflation is, and the biggest element is pay inflation, which will reflect the increase in the national living wage, which will be very significant this year, because as you know, the national living wage is going up quite substantially this year.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to highlight that even though it's last year's, and then we'll probably have, I wouldn't say similar inflation has gone down, but a substantial amount this year, plus the pay inflation, that how much of this is driven by factors outside our control as an authority, and we have to react to it with ever diminishing resources, if I'm honest. So the challenges are there, and I just wanted to highlight that point. So when members look at all the other figures, the challenges are there for us. But I'll come back later on in the friends to see, actually, forget for 3 years that this MTFS, what happens in year 4, year 5, year 6, when some of these cost pressures are still mounting, but we can only raise our own taxes by 5%, but also ever diminishing amounts from central government.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joel. I mean, I think people are aware of that. I mean, for new people looking at the budget, it is somewhat strange that we do it this way, but it's always been the County Council's policy to use a central contingency fund to even out the spread of either inflation or cost pressures. Or again, with this, part of this was, of course, the increase in residential care costs that we passed on to the sector to make sure it kept running as well. So some of this was in our control, but we had to do it because otherwise we wouldn't have had those places to put people. So thank you very much for that, Joel. We're now moving on to the growth section, which is paragraph 17 to 39, pages 16 to 19, and appendix B on page 33, as well as the savings adult social care paragraphs 40 to 70 with appendix. Well, in fact, let's do growth first, then we're moving into the next one. Otherwise, it's a bit big. So we'll just do growth first, pages 16 to 19, paragraph 17 to 39.
Thank you. So as it said at paragraph 19, overall growth requirement is just over 24 million for 24-25, rising to 46 million over the 4-year period. The detail of how that growth has been determined is in the following paragraphs. There's a general comment at paragraph 20 and 21 in terms of overall growth that we've seen in terms of the numbers of people requiring support through the council and the average cost of that support. And then in the further paragraphs, we detail the growth through sort of primary service requirements. The very largest amount of growth is, as detailed in paragraph 23, the demand arising from people over the age of 65. So that accounts for £17 million worth of next year's growth, rising to 34 million over the 4-year period. That position is not unique to Leicestershire. So we've seen nationally growth in adult social care, and growth in the spend on adult social care far outstripping both the ability of councils to fund it and the national inflation rates. So I think some figures from 22-23, which is the last full year that we've had, suggests that councils' spend grew by 8% overall, but adult social care grew by just under 12%. So it is a position that's being seen across the country. And most of that growth is in older people services. And for the first time since 2010, I think last year there was a growth in the numbers of people receiving support nationally. It's been going down year on year since 2010, but last year it actually went up for the first time. So that growth is part of the national picture, as well as creating a local pressure. And the growth is due to the numbers of people receiving services, largely driven by hospital discharge arrangements. That's where we see a doubling of the numbers of people coming out of hospital that require social care support, as well as an increase in the care needs of those people. Paragraph 26 then goes on to detail growth in learning disability demand from just under 8 million next year through to 18 million by 27-28. And again, that's due to demographic and cost pressures, both in terms of the numbers of people with complex disabilities who are living longer and the numbers of young people who are entering adult social care with very complex needs. Paragraph 30 and 31 respectively look at mental health demand and physical disability demand. Smaller numbers here, but not so insubstantial, from 2 million up to 5 million, and from 2 million up to 4 million for physical disabilities. And then the first element of non-demographic growth is the what's called the Liberty Protection Safeguards. This is the deprivation of liberty service, where detailed at paragraph 32, where we've asked for growth of £750,000. The budget has been set at its current level for 5 years, but during that time, the number of referrals have gone from 4,500 through to 7,000. And that putting an increasing strain on the ability of the service to contain the costs. We were hoping, and 2 or 3 years ago now, the government consulted on changes to that legislation. And in fact, we went all the way down through to very near implementation of a new liberty protection offer. But unfortunately, the government have decided that they can no longer implement that. That would have reduced the costs on the local authority. So unfortunately, we're in a position where we have to remain with the original legislation. Paragraph 34 and 35, paragraph 34 just notes a shortfall in income expected through the NHS. So a couple of years ago in the MTFS, we put in an additional £6 million worth of income that we were expecting. we're now in the position of looking at potentially a £3 million shortfall on that figure. So we've included that within the, added that to the growth. Paragraph 35 and 36 then net off some expected additional income both from service users and from the NHS in 24-25. And this is based on the fact that if the numbers of people that we serve is going up and our expenditure is going up, it's likely that our income will also go up. So there will be a little bit of netting off. We've then taken into account some additional income that we received in 23-24 for both those two elements, and we've also been able to net that off. And then finally, at paragraph 39, there is a demand management target that's been set, and this is a target which we've been asked to achieve, given that we've got such a large amount of growth within the budget. The council are asking us to look at whether we could mitigate that large amount of growth by around 10% of the net amount, which comes to £2 million in 24-25. So we'll be looking at how we can mitigate that growth with an additional saving factor against it during the next 12 months.
Thanks, John. Barry.
Thank you, Chair. John, going back to this paragraph 24, where we're saying there's significant changes in demand, mainly driven by the current hospital discharge process. Now, from personal experience, I've seen what this is like, and there's zero rehabilitation. It's discharged straight back out into the community, and it's the family members and the heart team that have had to pick that up and spend probably a month trying to get someone back to probably 90% of where they were before they went in. It feels like the NHS have withdrawn from rehabilitation, dumped that onto the councils, and probably no extra funding. Would that be a correct statement? And what's our pushback to try and remedy that?
Thank you for that non-controversial question. I wouldn't say that the NHS have withdrawn from that service, but clearly the NHS have a number of other pressures that they've had to also address over the course of the last few years. One of the things that has happened is we've had a very different discharge process since the pandemic, and much of that discharge decision making that used to be a multidisciplinary decision was landed within the NHS as the decision maker, and that did cause us some issues in terms of the overprescription of care on discharge and in terms of the speed of some of those discharge arrangements. Certainly we would, and we have been working with NHS colleagues over the course of the last 12 months to increase the amount of what's called the 3 Rs, the rehabilitation, reablement, recovery elements. And indeed, the community hospitals have just recently opened up some additional beds, 2 new wards, to take that forward in terms of the rehabilitation recovery. There have been some changes to the way that NHS out-of-hospital services have been commissioned, and certainly pre-pandemic there was a substantial amount of community nursing and therapy services that would work with people on discharge, and that service is no longer available. But equally, those resources have now been directed to things like, for example, the development of virtual wards, which have been very successful in working with people with conditions such as respiratory conditions and coronary conditions. And as you know, the NHS are under tremendous pressure in terms of waiting lists and in terms of people waiting for various forms of treatment. So we all have to kind of work as best we can together to make sure that we are addressing the totality of need, I guess.
I suppose what I'm trying to drill down to is, have we had to take on extra, and have we received additional funding to do so?
In short, yes, we've taken on extra. We have received some additional funding, but I think the paragraph that details that we would have wanted 6 million, we've had 3 million, probably answers that question.
Leon.
Thank you, Chair. I could spend 24 hours asking questions about these numbers, but you see, if we go to page 17, older people demand from 17 million to 34 million in 3 years' time. If you do the math, this is 30% increase year after year. And exactly the same number applies for the following learning disability demand, 7.8 million to 18 million. It's exactly 30% per year, every year after every other year for the 3 consecutive years. Now, where is 30% increase every year is coming from? Because it is typical, it's exactly 30%. Why this 30% every year increase? I don't understand that. I mean, how do you reach this conclusion that every year this will go up 30%?
I think it's coincidental. Everything goes up by 30%. We work on the number of service users and their average costs, and we also use national formula on the prediction of the number of people coming through as be new entrants. So it is coincidental if it is 30%. So I haven't done that calculation, but that's the basis of what we're doing. So it should be different each year, and it is different because we have dips in different periods. But yeah, I take your word for it, it's 30%, but I've not calculated a 30%.
Yeah, okay. And can I ask, further down, actually, it is actually mentioning about a discharge fund, which goes actually by 50% up. Is this actually taken into account in this, the discharge fund?
For the growth here, we gross up the actual demand that we need, and some of it is demand and previous costs coming through. So it's not just increases in service users, and then we net off the income. So yes, where we've got discharge funding is netted off further down in the accounts. So we are saying we're going to get extra money further down from health, beyond the discharge fund. The discharge fund is limited for certain periods of time.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, debate this all afternoon. It's still going around in circles, aren't we? Basic thing is that the costs are going up quite tremendously over the next few years. Somehow we've got to find the money to service these costs. Decisions are going to be made which we don't want to make. Got no choice. Got to balance the books. Unless, of course, the government comes up with a great deal more money, and I can't really see much hope of that at the present time. I think they're in a bit of a mess themselves. So I don't like some of the things in here, and I don't like some of the figures we see, but they are eye-watering, aren't they? When you look at them. We're not talking about a few £100, we're talking about millions of pounds going up over the next couple of years. We're an ageing population, so the demand is going to be there anyway. Being one of them, so it's a horrible situation to be in. Is there any hope of any more money coming from central government? Have we inquired if anything's happening in that regard on your with your colleagues in other councils? And what's the reply been?
So as far as I'm aware, there isn't. The cavalry are not coming over the hill. We did have a conversation just last week, actually. Had 2 conversations, one on a call with Department of Health and Social Care colleagues, and one on a call with Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities. And on neither of those calls was there any suggestion that there would be any additional funding coming through. In fact, the funding for 24-25, most of the social care funding for 24-25 was actually announced in 22-23, so it was a 2-year settlement at that point for social care. So we at least we had the benefit of having a little bit of time to plan for what we knew would be the position next year. But as far as I'm aware, and given that we're probably moving towards an election year, I don't think there's any prospect of additional funding coming through.
Speaking to the MPs, Chair, the county MPs, if we approach them to see if they can assist us in our difficulties.
What I would say, Bill, is I know that the leader of the council, Nick Rushton, has regularly met with both the MPs. As you're aware, he's been down to London to meet with the Chancellor. So, I think from a leadership point of view from the council, whatever your view is on the type of leader, the party of leadership, I don't think we can fault the leadership of this council for banging the drum and trying to get additional resources at every opportunity. I know the MPs are fully drawn into it. I know they've already had meetings with their county council colleagues, and I'm sure more such meetings will take place. But I think Nick has one thing I think we should applaud Nick for is he's been very open and honest in full council about his meetings with parliamentary colleagues and with senior party officials, particularly the Chancellor he met late last year. So every opportunity will be explored, and I'm sure all of us as local councillors take every opportunity to harangue our MPs about the need for additional money. I certainly do. And in fact, today there is a letter, isn't there, out being published asking the PM for more money for local government. I know that's been signed by 2 local MPs, just as an illustration of their commitment to Leicestershire. One thing I would ask, and I can't remember, but to put in context, should we go for the 2% increase in adult social care precepts this year? What does that raise these days, Judith? I can't remember what the figure is.
About 3 million per 1%, so it raised about 6 million.
The point I was making is that obviously it gives us opportunity, should the council decide to do such thing, to raise more money for adult social care. But the other thing I'd ask, John, is that we made considerable savings in my time on this committee, particularly through the target operating model. It's probably an unfair question with just dropping on you, but how much is that saving likely to have been worth to us had we not done all that work?
Very difficult to answer in terms of a lot of what ifs and maybes in that really. I think at the end of, by the time we come to the final savings out of that, we've saved in excess of 10 million through that process. But then if you add on inflation and other, it would have been many more millions than that probably. And it's interesting that you mentioned the council tax. One of the it's worth probably saying, as I said earlier, that national living wage is a significant pressure on the council, and it's a particular pressure for adult social care because the majority, as members around the table will know, the majority of social care services are delivered on the basis of national living wage for care staff. And we're talking, in excess of probably 17,000 care staff in the county that we support through the council, through contracts. What that means is that the national living wage will cost the council over £20 million on its own. And that figure is actually more than the council can raise, even if it takes the precept. So even if council takes a precept, it'll probably raise about £18 million through council tax. And national living wage on its own will cost 20 million.
Thanks, John. I think the point I was trying to make is that the times are very difficult. I think we all acknowledge that, irrespective of whichever party. The point I was trying to make is that we have taken advantage by making difficult decisions to take the adult and social care precept over recent years. And had we not done all of the very valuable work we've done as a council in adults and social care over the last few years, just think where we would have been otherwise. So I do take positives from the fact that our team led by John are looking under every stone for every potential save and enacting changes, which I still believe have provided a quality service for our residents. In fact, I suspect pound for pound, we probably offer the best service in the country for money spent. So things should be proud of, but I do agree with you, Bill, that we will take every opportunity to bang the drum. And I'm only agreeing with my leader on that when he does that at every opportunity, and should be applauded for it. So any further questions on this section? No, we'll now move on to the section on savings, which is paragraphs 40 to 70, pages 19 to 24, and AC1 to AC17 on Appendix C, page 35. Thanks, John.
Thank you. I'll just focus on the ones that are increases or changes, if that's okay, Chair. So the overall saving requirement over the lifetime of the MTFS is from £6.5 million in 24-25 up to £13.5 million over the 4-year period. As it says in the report, we've tried to highlight those areas that are not changed from the past. MTFS, which is the ones with a star next to them, those which were highlighted in the previous MTFS but have increased or changed, which are the ones with 2 stars, and anything new doesn't have a star at all. So just running through the savings, there's a slight increase to the income expectation in 24-25. That, as always, we uplift it every year in line with Department of Work and Pensions payments. Looking down and through, next one that's significantly changed or different. We had a saving last year against a new contract for extra care. Having done the analysis, that contract will deliver additional savings again in this financial year. We've included a new or an uplifted target against the Heart Reablement Team and Community Response Team. So this is predicated on Heart increasing their delivery to support everybody that is discharged from hospital. It's called an intake model, so that everybody that comes out of hospital will have a heart episode. So at the moment, Heart deal with the majority, well about 60-70%, but a number of people still have to go directly into long-term home care without a heart intervention. This is to make sure that everybody gets that intervention, so that people become more independent, but it also is better financially for the council. There's a new and improved saving against the 3 conversations model. We've discussed that in the committee before, so this is where we are looking to, wherever possible, ensure that people are linked into services in their local communities, that families are able to support people more effectively, and therefore require less of support through the county council. And from paragraph 59 onwards, we're detailing some new areas of commissioning. So again, there's an additional element on extra care there as we grow our extra care stock and make better use of it. We're looking at potentially block booking residential care beds to see whether or not there would be a financial efficiency in there for us. And we're looking at what we might be able to do differently around home care for people who don't have personal care needs, or for people who perhaps do have personal care needs and require a home care service, but also require lower level services such as shopping or cleaning or what have you, and whether we could commission that differently and at better value to the council. And then the final one of those is looking at sharing the cost of a mental health recovery and rehabilitation service with the ICB. So it's a cost that we currently bear, and we're talking to colleagues in the ICB about sharing that cost because again, it's a service that is largely around people who are being discharged from hospital. So they're the new and different ones, but I'm happy to take questions on any of the others, Chair.
Well, thanks, John. Barry?
Thank you, Chair. John, going to paragraph 69, when we're talking about this personal and non-personal care and looking at ways of splitting that up. The only thing I say that would concern me is how you look at doing that. So if there's a demarcation between that's a care and that's a non-care, you could end up in a situation where the care person says, well, I'm not doing that job because that's not mine. And then you're paying someone to drive half an hour to get there to do the 5-minute job, and it ends up costing you more. So you've got to be very careful how you proceed with that to make sure that you don't just get people saying, no, I'm not doing that, and then you pay more in the end. Even though you might be paying a lower hourly rate, you end up paying a lot more for the task.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point. Well made. We will obviously be looking at each individual circumstance. So we wouldn't implement any of this without reviewing everybody prior to any changes. But it is the case at the moment where, and as we said through this committee previously, we are our home care fee rates per hour compare well with other authorities. We do recompense home care companies to a good degree in Leicestershire. And in some areas of the county, that can be up to upwards of £26, £27 an hour. If we are paying £27 an hour for a shopping service, that working with the voluntary and community sector, we could potentially get for £15 to £20 an hour, then there may be some significant savings. But we would only do that where it wasn't detrimental to the individual. Clearly, we'd have to take that into account.
Bill?
Could you enlarge on item 48 on page 21? Direct payments, commission inefficiencies. Is that reading that? Does that mean you're going to take money back off people if they've got a surplus in their budget? Is that what it's actually meaning? 48.
My paragraph 48 is on extra care.
Page 21.
48 is direct payment.
Oh, sorry, I've got the wrong
efficiencies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's the direct payment one, is it?
Yeah, direct payment commission and efficiencies, AC6.
AC6. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So we do this every year. So this isn't new. This is sort of good housekeeping, really. So what happens with direct payments is that we put money into a bank account for people to purchase their own care, and individuals themselves then add in their contribution, and that gives them their personal budget. Where what we try and ensure is that people have always got a contingency of at least 4 weeks in advance. So they've always got 4 weeks worth of money in the account, a minimum of 4 weeks worth of money in the account. But where people are building up surplus balances, and people do on a regular basis, we then ask them if they would return anything surplus over and above the 4 weeks that they need for any contingency back to the council. And the reason we do that is because at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money. It's council tax that's funding those services. So if somebody's got 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000, sometimes people have upwards of that in their accounts that they're not due to spend on care. So we can look at what they're due to spend. And if they've got excess in their accounts, we ask for it back.
That's an interesting situation, Chair, isn't it? I can imagine, first of all, why they've got the extra money in the account anyway. Did we give them too much in the first place? Were they assessed wrong? In that case, is it their fault or is it our fault? And once you've paid money into people, in my experience, it's very difficult to get it out of them again. So what are you going to do if they say, no, I'm not going to give it back to you?
Well, you know? First thing is we try not to do it on a fault kind of basis. One of the reasons why direct payments is successful is that if you give people an opportunity to purchase their own care, often what will happen is that people will purchase less care than might have been originally commissioned. So we will go out, we'll meet somebody, we'll assess their need, and we'll say, well, we think you need X amount of care a week. The person will say, oh, thank you very much. They'll then go out and purchase care. What we know is that people largely don't overbuy care. People really don't want lots of carers coming in and out of the house. People will try to be as independent as they can. People would rather rely on family and friends where they can. They don't want people they don't know coming in and out. And what happens is often that people will say, actually, I know you said I could have 4 calls a day, but I can manage with 3 because my daughter will do my lunch, or I don't need care on a Sunday because I'm going to my daughter's, or whatever it happens to be. If we buy that care through a home care agency, we will have to pay for that care, whether the person receives it or not. But with a direct payment, the person just doesn't spend all the money in the account. So after a period of time, if we say to them, we've noticed that you're not using all of this, do you think you need it going forward? If you don't need it, can you pay it back? Largely people do, actually. As I said, this is something we do every year, and the amount of money that, if you like, for want of a better word, we claw back is in the seven figures. We spend over £40 million on direct payments, and we tend to get 3 to 5% back through people not spending it. And the same is true of home care, of course. So when we commission home care, we have to commission 100% of the cost. But actually, if you look at non-delivery, and when we do the audits and the accounts, and that sort of when people send their invoices in and we verify the invoices, there's a similar level of under-delivery in home care as well. It's just a different way of paying for care. So generally, people are very good, actually, at managing the money, and people are generally very good at paying the money back if they don't need it.
I trust you're happy, Bill. I mean, I remember when this first came in, direct payments, we had several presentations, this committee, about direct payments, and looked to actually hone in the system. And I think, as John says, I mean, in my time chairing this committee, it's been very successful. And, I suppose the answer to the question is, if people don't send it back, we just don't give them as much next time, because they won't need it until they spent the balance. So there's always a way of getting it back. But I think John has hit the nail on the head that giving people personal freedom has its benefits for the person and for the council. And obviously us taking the money back means that Judith and the finance team can utilise that money far more effectively for the council to reduce costs elsewhere. But it may be that perhaps, during the course of this year, perhaps it might be worth just having a report on direct payments, because it's probably been 3 years since we've had one. Just to perhaps expand on it a bit more, if that might be suitable, Bill.
From experience, I know that certain people I do know have need 4 calls a day, but they decide to save the money and have 1 call less. So we're not fulfilling what the person actually needs, missing a call out. It could be a lunchtime call, it could be any other call. So they regarding that money as their money, not spending it for what it should be used for. It should be used for the number of calls that are specified by a specialist, an OT, or whatever it might be. That should be used for that, not make a cost saving and put it in the bank. I'm just concerned that people are receiving the care they actually need and not cutting the budget.
I think perhaps that's why we need something coming back just to allay your fears. I mean, if people choose under personal freedom not to have one of those calls, as John has articulated, and we're not seeing a worsening of their conditions, etc., because of it, that's surely up to personal freedom. And as John has said, it's not their money, it's our money, which sits in a dedicated account for that person. I think it's a question well made, and I think we've made a note to look at an update report on direct payments during the year, which might allay your fears. Do we have any further questions on this section? No, right. We're now moving on to savings, communities and wellbeing, which will also take in conjunction with savings under development. So paragraphs 71 to 78 on pages 24 to 25, and also AC 18 and AC 20, and also Appendix C on page 35.
Thank you. So paragraphs 70, AC 18 and AC 19 are savings that we've brought previously through the MTFS. That's the implementation of the revised service for community wellbeing and the review of the Green Plaque service. There is a new or additional saving, which is the review of the charging for creative learning services, which is £50,000 from 24-25, and we've got a report on that later on the agenda. In terms of savings under development, we only have the one item, which is the transitions review. So we are going to commence some work in the next 12 months with colleagues in Children and Family Services to look at the way that people move from children's services into adult services and the pathway into adulthood. and to look at whether or not there are any better ways of delivering that service that would be have improved outcomes and would be financially beneficial for the council. So that's some work that we'll be taking forward over the next 12 months with a view to potentially bringing something into the MTFS next year.
Thanks, John. Bill?
Yes, Chair. 72 Green Plaque Scheme. Have we looked at sponsorship for this at all?
We have considered sponsorship, and we didn't feel that it was a viable proposition.
So we're not tested the market then? Somebody's assumed it's not going to be worthwhile, so we're not tested the market, so we don't know if anybody would sponsor it or not.
So we looked into the potential for sponsorship. We looked at various options before ceasing the service. So we looked at the potential for sponsorship. We looked at potentially joining or integrating with some of the districts who also have run similar schemes in the past. But we felt that from an MTFS position, the most effective way of making the saving was to cease the service.
Yeah, I think if I'm right, John, this was a decision that was made last year, wasn't it, rather than this year? So this is an old decision which has already been approved by council, which is now just being implemented. So I can understand where you're coming from, Bill, but it's gone. No, but it would have been in the full council report last year, which all members would have had. So I mean, it's there and gone, and John is just articulating the saving. Any further questions on this section? Sure.
Thank you. Just on the transitions review, I know we're going to have a consultation period and then decide, in essence, what we want to do with that service. What kind of reassurance can we give to people who actually access this service right now? Because it's from year 9 basically to age 25, so there'll be a lot of people in the system already, that we're not immediately looking to withdrawing the service, we're just reshaping and remodeling the service.
Yeah, absolutely. The current service offer will continue whilst we do the review. We won't be making any changes until we've got the outcome of the review. And obviously, if at the end of that review period we decide that we need to make some changes either to the way that children's services operate or to the way that adult services operate, we'll go through a full and formal consultation process.
No further questions on this section. We're going to the final section now, which is the capital programme, which is pages 92 to 94 on page 28 and Appendix D on page 37. My vice chairman has quite correctly said that I've missed a section. Where am I up to? Oh yeah, there you go. So shows how keen I'm getting. So we've got health and social care integration, other external influences and other funding sources, which are paragraphs 79 to 91, pages 25 and 27. I was trying to let you off easy there, John, but they caught me out.
It's very kind. So yes, the health and social care integration is largely the Better Care Fund, which started in 2015-16 and continues into the next financial year. As you'll see from paragraph 80, well, my paragraph 84 is probably your paragraph 85, actually. The value of the BCF next year is £82.5 million. It's a substantial amount of money. The NHS allocation of that is £51 million plus an element of the discharge fund. The county council also then add in £22 million alongside the discharge fund. The value to the council is that in addition to the money that we put in, virtually £23 million of the NHS allocation is used to sustain adult social care services. That's as a minimum contribution, but actually in addition to that, there's a further £8 million worth of NHS funding that goes towards adult social care services. So it's vitally important that this funding is maintained. In terms of other external funding, we've just detailed there a whole host of grants, smaller grants and government grants which go to sustain adult social care. Some of them are fairly small, sort of £100,000, £50,000, but others are significant. So the most significant of which is the Market Sustainability and Improvement Fund, which is worth over £10 million.
So you've got no questions on this section, John. So we'll now go on to the final section, as I tried to say once before, which is the capital programme, which is paragraphs 92 to 94 on page 26 and Appendix D on page 37.
Thank you. So the capital programme is not insignificant, but is certainly compared to other council departments, not a large amount of the budget of the capital programme. So just over £22 million of capital for adults and communities, of which 19.5 million is passported directly through to district councils for the Disabled Facilities Grant. That leaves a balance of just under £3 million of discretionary funding, which we use for the Social Care Investment Programme. And under future developments, you'll see that we still have some accommodation opportunities being investigated, predominantly around extra care developments, alongside the Heritage and Learning Hub, which is, as we've discussed in committee before, still on the future developments section of the capital programme.
Any questions on this section? I think it's just worth commenting that certainly disabled facility grants has been something the government has poured lots of money into over certainly the time I've become a councillor. I remember when I first became a district councillor, my district council was subsidising disabled facility grants to the tune of £200,000 a year. Whereas now I think, the funds are available. So I appreciate it's easy to be negative about central government and say they haven't given councils the money and that sort of thing. But in some areas we have got more money to the major advantage of our residents. And I think the way the scheme has been run, particularly with the implementation of light bulb and the way that the county council works with the districts, I think is exemplary in the way councils can and should operate in providing these services. So I'd just like to make the point, particularly residents out there, that light bulb and disabled facility grants is a really, really good service. The way it's put out in Leicestershire is second to none. And I think it's something we should applaud and something we should thank all those involved for the time and effort they put in implementing it and running it forward. So, it's not all bad news. There are some positive features here, and I think that's one of them. So with that, I think Angela has taken a note of all of our comments, which will be passed on to Cabinet. So could I thank everybody for that? And with that, we move on from the MTFS, and we're now moving on to agenda item 9, which is the National Performance Benchmarking 2022-23 and Performance Report 23-24, position as at November 2023. They give me such a large introduction on this, which allows Matt plenty of time to get into his seat. So welcome again, Matt. Always good to see you. And again, just pass you over just to expand on a few highlights. I wouldn't go through all the report, but just expand on those things that you think are noteworthy on pages 39 to 54.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'll pick out some of the key aspects then of the report. It's the usual report that comes to committee in January. It carries the April to November position of the current year, but there's a lot of focus on the benchmarking of the 22-23 performance, primarily in adult social care. This is data that was released by NHS England in the autumn. It's explained and outlined in paragraph 3 that this is the adult social care outcomes framework. Slightly less metrics in it this time round. The carers survey, which is a biennial survey, didn't take place. However, the full adult social care survey did, and we'll pick up some of those aspects further in the report. So paragraph 9 is probably where I would start, and perhaps reflecting some of that conversation with the previous item, the demand on adult social care services, and it talks about over 2 million requests for adult social care support across the nation. It's the first time 2 million has been exceeded, and Leicestershire was no different. We compare ourselves to a peer group of authorities, which I think there might be a footnote on that page explaining it. But if we look at that as a rate per 100,000 population for comparison purposes, Leicestershire received more contacts than the average of that group, and in particular, we do receive more from discharges from hospital. So paragraph 10 picks up one of the elements of the outcomes of these requests, and that is re-ablement services. We make good use of it in Leicestershire. 15% of contacts do receive a re-ablement service, and that compares to 12% nationally. The ASCOF, this outcomes framework nationally, has a couple of metrics in there to judge the kind of the success of that service. One's about people having no ongoing services following a period of re-ablement, and the other is people living at home 3 months or 91 days later. On both those metrics, the County Council continues to be a very strong performer. We're ranked in the top 25% of authorities nationally, and despite we are increasing our use of re-ablement in the County Council, and despite this, that high level of performance, those high outcomes are still being achieved through 23-24 up to the period at the end of November. Paragraph 11 is focusing on people with learning disabilities aged 18 to 64. There's a couple of metrics in there around employment and settled accommodation. Employment, at 9.1% of those, that cohort of people being in paid employment, that puts us again into that top 25% of authorities. It's an area where we've succeeded quite well over the number of years. I think 5 years we've been in that top quartile. For settled accommodation, 85.6% were classed as being in settled accommodation, and not quite in the top quartile, but we were considerably higher than the national average. Again, a bit like the re-ablement, two high-level performing metrics have continued through into the current year. So moving on, paragraphs 12 and 13 touch on residential and long-term residential and nursing services. The ASCOF has two metrics in here, which one for the 18 to 64 group, one for the 65 and over, and they show the number of admissions during that year as a rate per 100,000 population. Now, for the younger age group, 18 to 64, there was a small increase in 22-23 from the previous year locally. However, despite that, we remain lower than the national average, which is where we obviously would like to be. For over 65s, I think it's worth just bearing in mind the context, and that is a growing population in Leicestershire of that age group. It was 1.6% up on the previous year. So when we look at the admissions into permanent care in Leicestershire as a rate, again, as I said, 100,000 population, we find it actually fell slightly in 22-23. It was lower than the national average. And what's particularly interesting, while we did have a small decrease in Leicestershire in 22-23, the national position, actually that national rate, did increase by 4%. We tend to use permanent care a little less in Leicestershire compared to our peer group. We do rank lower than an average of it. And when we look at the kind of everybody who needs them, or whose needs require a long-term service in the county, we do tend to make more use of community care. So if we look at the proportion of people in a residential bed, whether that be nursing or residential, we find that for those aged 18 to 64, we're ranked second lowest. And for those 65 or over, we're actually ranked the lowest amongst our peer group. Paragraph 14 touches on direct payments, and again, was discussed in the previous item. Very strong performer in our use of direct payments, particularly for service users. But both service users and carers, we have a higher proportion than what the national picture is. Moving on to paragraphs 15-16, this is where we get into the surveys. So, as I mentioned a moment ago in the introduction, there was no carer survey in 22-23, but we did conduct the annual survey of people in receipt of services. The first metric highlighted is that relating to how how easily people can find information. And in Leicestershire, there was actually a significant improvement in 22-23 compared to the previous year. However, at 62%, it did remain in the bottom quartile, so the bottom 25% of authorities. It was a similar position for the 39% of respondents stating that they had as much social contact as they wished. Again, that's below the national average of 44% and puts Leicestershire into that bottom 25% of authorities. The paragraph concludes with a consideration of those who state that the services that they receive from the council help them to feel safe. Again, in 22-23, we saw a significant improvement in the county council, and this helped lift us out of kind of the bottom quartile, but unfortunately we still fell slightly short of the national average for that year. Safeguarding is the subject of paragraph 17. Alerts, the number of alerts we take at a rate per 100,000, slightly higher than the East Midlands average, but lower than the national average. But I think it's probably the inquiries that jump out of that paragraph, really. Quite a disparity between the rate in Leicestershire compared to the East Midlands. And this is partly down to at what stage an authority perhaps classes the work in safeguarding, whether that's actually part of an inquiry or not. An audit of local practice in spring last year had the result of a shift in the way we determine those thresholds, not the way we determine them, but at what point we class those thresholds being looked at. They are now part of that inquiry. And in doing so, that has shifted the number of inquiries we undertake up by 42% when we look at April to November of the current year compared to the previous year. Finally, in relation to, in relation to adult social care benchmarking, paragraph 18 looks at annual reviews and highlights that for people awaiting their annual review, 76% of them had it within 12 months of their previous review, and this compares pretty favourably to 57% nationally. So I'll just move on for the final part of the report to look at communities and wellbeing. Paragraph 20 highlights heritage visits during April to November of last year. Now, at that point in time, they were reaching their milestone, which is putting them on track to meet their annual target for the full year 23-24. Paragraphs 21 and 22 touch on library visits and also library loans, and there's been growth in both of those areas, and all of which are in line again with that November milestone, putting them on track to meet their full year target. So to finalise communities and wellbeing aspect of the report, paragraphs 23 through to 25 highlight the good work of the Creative Learning Service, and I believe there's a paper in more detail further on the agenda on that. The support for volunteering and the Adult Learning Service, all of which again are in line with the milestone where we'd hope they'd be in November if they're going to be on track to meet their 23-24 target. So the report concludes paragraphs 26 through to 32, summarising the benchmarking I've mentioned, strong areas of performance, we've touched on, and the use of community services rather than permanent residential or nursing. It also flags the challenging survey results that we've fed back during the report. And again, just as I mentioned, it highlights the strong performance within communities and wellbeing service in the recent 6 to 8 months of this year. So happy to take any comments or questions.
Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at paragraph 16, where we say that the proportion of people who felt they had as much social contact as they would like was low. Surely part of that is the fact that we do so well at keeping people within their own homes, but then they're naturally going to have less social contact because they're in their own homes rather than in a care environment. So we kind of kick ourselves for one thing because we do so well in something else. Would that be a fair point?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting comment. One thing we don't do is, and we could go and have a look, is comparing some of the results or the findings that you get back from the surveys with the shape of the services that you provide for an authority, because clearly some use a lot of residential care, some a lot less, and vice versa with the community. So that might be something worth just considering how that plays out amongst the service provision.
Anyone else? Joel?
Just a quick one. There were several references to where we there's a there's potentially less people we're servicing because population growth has gone up. But when you look at it pro rata, the people that we're servicing has gone down in, for example, paragraph 12. I can understand that logic of why that might happen, but what are we doing to see people haven't fallen through the cracks and we've accidentally missed them? Because obviously if the population is growing and percentage wise we should be servicing that level of people, but we're actually servicing less per 100,000. Did you get that?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I think it's possibly to do more with paragraph 12. Yeah, it's paragraph 13. I think whilst the number of people going into residential care or nurse care on a permanent basis has reduced as a rate against that backdrop of the increase in the population, it's because we're supporting people more in their own home. So it's not necessarily that people are falling through the cracks. It's just that as an opportunity to either basically to support people in their own home where they'd rather be. Leicestershire County Council are very good at doing that. And I think we've had discussions here in this committee before where our use of home care is going up considerably, possibly in line with population growth and needs, etc. So yes, it's to do with how we support people really and doing that in their own homes.
Just a quick one from me, Matt. And we've debated these so often. I'm sure one day we'll be happy with them. But I mean, I always worry about these. I mean, I look at page 50 and I look at ASCOF 2A Part 1, permanent admissions to care ages 18 to 64, which we show in brown. Although we're actually comparing 22-23 to 22-23, we're actually far better. Now we've gone brown because 23-24. We've increased the level, but we don't know what the national average is for 23-24. So we don't truly know if it should be brown, do we? So, I mean, would it not be more sensible to have perhaps a 5-year rolling average? Because if over the previous 4 years we've been lower than the rest of the country, 1 year blip shouldn't make us brown. It just brings us slightly nearer to where the rest of the country are. And I just worry about these. I suspect this is prescribed because it's an ASCOF one and you have to do year on year. But to me, there's no point having figures if they don't tell a story. And this doesn't tell a story because we haven't got a 5-year rolling average or anything. We don't know how we relate to the totality of permanent admissions for that age group. And it just strikes me as fairly useless, to be honest, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, I take your point. Unfortunately, we do have to wait. The national figures aren't released till around about November. In fact, it was December what we received these this year for 22-23. So you're looking at 7 months from when we report them in May back to NHS England. So that's how long it takes them to kind of turn it around and publish them back out. They're published figures, they're available for everybody. So yes, and when we get to this stage of the year, and now in January, it is looking back some way, isn't it? It's looking back 10 months. So I do understand your comment.
I suppose it's almost trying to concern people look at colours, they don't read it or think about it, and they just look at a colour and think, oh, they're not doing very well on that. But the simple fact is we don't know. So would it not be sensible to leave it as green based on 22-23 and then turn it to brown if it should be brown when we get the figures from central government about what 23-24 looks like? Because otherwise, I just worry that people taking these cold and looking at them could actually think, well, in certain areas, Leicestershire aren't performing very well, but we don't know. We have been performing excellently, and over a 5-year average, I suspect we've performed brilliantly. So it may be there's some sort of work we want to do periodically, look at a 5-year rolling average and the totality of admissions per 100,000 across the country going forward. That's not to say whether it might not be worthwhile, and you might say, well, that's a lot of work, Terry, for no point. But I just think we shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes. Anyway, if there's no further questions on that one, I think we've taken a note of the comments. Everybody happy? Yep, thank you. Matt's running away quickly thinking, do I want all that extra work? And I think Fran's rushing over to join us. And we need Fran because she's, I'm told, our technical guru for this one. I'm just waiting for everybody to sit down. It's all right. Thank you, Indrajit. So I've been assured, Fran, that you're just going to introduce the little YouTube video and somebody's going to run it for us.
I'm sure it'll work perfectly. So yes, thank you, Chair. Just briefly, Creative Learning Services leads on the County Council's cultural offer to schools and young people in education. It brings together the rich resources of our library and heritage services with expert learning professionals to create a comprehensive and targeted offer to primary, secondary and SEN schools across the county. The service is designed to foster a love of independent learning in pupils, and this focus has helped us develop a high quality offer which responds to the needs of schools, enables access to the County Council's cultural assets and minimises costs to the council. Sites visits to specific museums or heritage sites are still managed by the relevant operational team. But we're going to show you a short film if we can, because it illustrates what the service does much better than I could possibly describe it to you. Fingers crossed.
We are Creative Learning Services. We provide pupil sessions, cultural resources and staff training that are tailor-made to meet your needs and budget. With a wealth of professional staff expertise and carefully selected resources, we can deliver engaging learning opportunities which not only support the curriculum but inspire pupils with creative activities and equip you with the expertise to use those resources effectively. Our services have been specially designed for all year groups. They offer excellent value for money, save you time and are delivered straight to your school. At the heart of our work are our resources. Our extensive collection of fiction and non-fiction library stock supports teaching across the curriculum with up-to-date, high-quality books selected by a team of expert professional librarians. Fiction collections encourage reading for pleasure. They will inspire children and staff to try something new. Let children see themselves in the books they read, encourage empathy and expand their horizons. They support mental health and well-being and allow children to make informed decisions about what they read. You can work with our librarians to select books so you can be confident you'll be receiving the best quality, most relevant library stock for your school. Our amazing museum and art collections provide opportunities for pupils to use real objects and works of art in the classroom. The Artworks collection gives you access to original works of art by exciting artists such as Picasso and David Hockney. They can create vibrant focal points throughout the school, as well as being a catalyst for inspiring art activities. We can help with expert guidance to make sure that you find works of art to complement the school curriculum and give you tips on how to use them. Our artefact collections give you access to real and replica museum objects to support topic work, help you create awe-inspiring displays and bring learning to life within your classrooms. This extensive collection includes objects from prehistory to the recent past, a vast range of British mammals and birds, items reflecting the world's religions, fossils and minerals, incredible dinosaur models and much, much more. Touch tiles and held in the hand collections are specially created tactile resources whose potential use is limited only by your and your pupils' imaginations. With our stunning collections at their core, all our workshops are developed and delivered by experts in their field, so you can be guaranteed a unique learning experience. Our museum workshops are a cost-effective way of bringing the museum to your school. Led by specialists using real artefacts or museum-quality replicas, they provide object-based, hands-on, immersive engagement for all learning styles, including pupils with SEND.
The children have had a fantastic experience today with all the expert knowledge from the ladies who have come in and brought all the things. They've really enjoyed handling all the actual artefacts that they've got and dressing up, and it has been absolutely essential for their learning to actually get hold of things and take part in it and make things come to life. As a teacher, having this resource of the CLS and all the equipment that they bring, their expertise, their professionalism with the children really helps us to trust what they're doing, to enable the children's learning and to enable them to actually access and hands-on things that they might not see normally in school.
Book Book Talking workshops are ideal whether you're looking to encourage reading for pleasure with reluctant readers or if your engaged readers are looking for a new challenge. These workshops are tailor-made with books specially chosen for each group.
So the children absolutely love having CLS visit. They love the sessions, they're really interactive, their expertise on genres and different authors, that's fantastic opportunities for the children and for staff as well. Their advice and support is brilliant, and we can't ask for more. The benefits of using CLS and having them work so closely with us is that they know exactly what age-appropriate text to bring, they know the curriculum, they work very closely with our school and match the books to our curriculum and our needs of the children.
Our art workshops encourage pupils to explore the art and artefacts collections, consider how artists have created their work and inspire them to do the same. Our collections, experts and approach give everyone confidence in their own creativity and bring a different learning dynamic to the classroom. Whichever workshop you choose, we will bring everything needed to deliver curriculum-linked cultural learning without you having to leave the classroom. What could be easier, more efficient and more cost-effective?
This is our second year now of using creative learning services, and the benefit to the children has been absolutely outstanding. Staff and children both love it when we have our visitors from the services come in. We've had some wonderful art sessions, history sessions and reading sessions. All of our curriculum areas are brought to life with real life artefacts, with people who are specialists, and even today in school, whilst the children are doing their art session, they have an original piece of Aboriginal art to help inspire them and motivate them to do well. Creative learning services have been really helpful in helping me map what they deliver to our curriculum progression maps. When we have our art sessions or our history sessions, I've been able to talk to someone, tell them what the skills and knowledge that I need the children to learn, and they've tailored the lesson to help me achieve that target. This was really helpful for when we had our Ofsted inspection, and I could explain the skills and knowledge that the children had learned through the evidence from the creative learning service session.
Alongside our workshops and resources, we'll support you to get the most out of them with bespoke training to make sure everyone who uses our services has the skills and confidence they need. And we understand just how important the role of the family is to a child's engagement with reading. So our family reading cafes are the perfect way to engage them with reading at school and at home. Creative Learning Services equips, empowers and enables school library staff, teachers and teaching assistants to have the skills and confidence to use our services across the curriculum, inspiring their pupils to learn, achieve and realise their potential through cultural resources.
If you'd like to find out more, we'd be happy to come and meet you and talk about how we can support you. Contact us at cls@leics.gov.uk, telephone 0116 305 3800, or visit www.creativelearningservices.org.uk.
One has to question why John didn't do a video for the MTFS. That's all I was thinking. But thanks very much for that. I think, as you said, it's a great video, and I think take it as read. We've all read the report. I don't normally ask a question first, but it's only for a bit of clarification for the team. When we're looking at paragraph 20, where we said there are currently 104 subscribing schools and 32 regular schools, what we're trying to sense was how many of those were primary and how many were secondary. I also noticed it says in Leicester and Leicestershire and Leicester, so I presume it covers the whole of the county. So do Leicester actually chip in any money? Probably not, knowing Leicester. And I suppose, from the point of view of the chairman's briefing, the question we had is, and perhaps if you expand on that first, is what are we doing to get more people to take up the service, apart from the excellent video we've just seen? And if we were to get more, could we actually reduce the cost to make it even more attractive from people? And that might then prompt some questions. So don't worry about going through the report, just if you can tackle those bits, and then I'm sure it'll open it up to a lively debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, really good points. In terms of the balance of subscriptions, around 2/3 of subscribers are primary schools and the other third are secondary. And there are a lot more primary schools than there are secondary. Having said that, because secondary schools are larger, the size of their subscription tends to be substantially higher. So I think in the report you'll see the range of subscriptions sort of range from sort of around £1,000 is about the minimum up to 12.5. At the moment, that'll increase next year. So most secondary schools are towards the top end of that subscription market. We do deliver across the whole of the city and Rutland, and because schools subscribe, Leicester City don't make a baseline contribution towards the service, but we do prioritise the county council's collections and resources. So we don't promote the city's collections and resources, we promote ours. And it's a really good way for us to promote our library service and also our museum and heritage sites, so that hopefully the schools that engage with the CLS provision, which is much easier for them to do because they can do it from within the school, hopefully then gets inspired and then want to go and make a trip out to Bosworth Battlefield or Milton Museum. So I think we get a good benefit from that. It's worth saying there are some schools outside of the county that subscribe. So there are some Rutland schools that subscribe and some from periphery sort of counties. So we do kind of get that benefit of that income. There is a bit of a geographic limit, because obviously the further we go to deliver those resources, the higher our costs are. So generally where they're within easy reach, we're really happy to support it. And one of the things we did over COVID, and it's still growing, is we started to try out digital provision. So we have got some limited offers which you can do through digital resources. And I think there's a link in paragraph 30 of your report as a bit of an example. So they're things that people from further afield can buy into. Very, very small part of the offer at the moment, but potentially might grow. Your other point was around how do we get more schools to subscribe? All ideas really welcome. I think there's reference in the report to some of the things that we do all the moment. We're in constant contact with schools, trying to understand what they need. They're a really, really complex market. They're very price sensitive, and also changes in personnel within the school have a real impact, because new people come in and they want to do things sort of differently. So continuing to do what we do, improving our website. We've just made some improvements to the website, and that's where some of these new films have come from. The team go out and they attend a lot of cluster events and activities where schools are present to promote the offer. One opportunity that we're looking at is, as you'll probably be aware, across Leicestershire, a lot of schools are academy schools and we're in clusters. And what we find is we've managed to engage with one school in the cluster that encourages others to buy in. So if we can find entry routes into clusters that don't currently subscribe, there might be an opportunity. The challenge with more schools bringing the cost down is that this is a resource-led service. So the more schools that subscribe, the more resources we need to provide, the more time that goes into delivering it, and the more travel. So it doesn't necessarily bring the subscription price down, but obviously our other driver is we want as many young people in Leicestershire to benefit from access to this kind of resource, because I think, as you saw in the video, and we've seen it in a lot of Ofsted reports, is schools that use this facility get it quoted and demonstrate that it actually drives attainment, it expands the children's learning. So that's why we want to do it, as well as obviously minimise the cost to the authority. I hope that's okay.
Thanks, Fran. Barry?
Thank you, Chair. Thinking is obviously, budgets are tight within schools, so they're trying to work out what they're going to spend their money on. You don't know if something's worthwhile having until you've tried it. Have we looked at putting together like free trials for schools to go in and let them have a free session, and then they can reflect on that, see how much that's worked? The other thing is the Ofsted thing is a really important thing to push, because it's always something schools are always worried about, and anything that adds to an improved score from Ofsted is always a benefit. And I think that's something you should really push for. But I think free trials would be, even if you budgeted so many in per year or something like that, I think that could really, and you could even invite other schools, as long as you say to give like mini clusters. But I think if you could do that, you might get people think this is worthwhile having.
Absolutely agree, and it is something that we do, and I think the other thing that the team do is they do take time to talk to schools about what their budget is and what they can afford. So where we can kind of be flexible within reason to kind of accommodate, and particularly we find with the smaller primary schools where they've got less resource, and that's part of the reason why we introduced the pay as you go option. So whilst kind of individually it's a more expensive way of doing it. If you are a small school and you've not got a lot of resource, you can at least buy in the things that you think are most important, and it's a good way of testing a service without committing to a full subscription, or equally topping up that subscription if you kind of just want to, if there's a school that's got a particular issue and wants to focus on it, can bring it in. But yeah, thanks for your point about, I think we're trying to get more confident about sharing kind of the feedback and Ofsted, definitely.
Just one other point as well, and I'm thinking going further down into other reports when we look at what we've done with the libraries with this volunteer thing. Obviously, when it comes to history and things like that, there's an awful lot of people out there with different societies, history societies, this, that and the other. Whether there's a volunteer force out there as well that could actually be used and utilised to go in, because there's a lot of experts out there with stuff that could probably contribute and help keep your costs down and give you more staff.
Just another one from me. You mentioned a long list of people you try and get to try and encourage them. The one group that you didn't mention was school governors. A very underrated bunch. I spent 23 years, but in theory, school governors actually do run the school. And they often get missed. And sometimes if you talk to the head teacher, you get nowhere. You need to talk to the governor. So how much effort do you make to attend governors' meetings and perhaps show that video and give them a 5-minute talk? So I think particularly in large multi-academy trusts, that might pay you dividends, because there might always be room for negotiation on what the price is if you're doing several schools in a large trust.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, I have to give hats off to the team because they are really good. They get to know their individual schools, and the reality is the right person in each individual school is entirely different. And I think that was one of the lessons we learned when we pulled out the expertise from the individual service areas, because it used to sit in individual libraries and museum and heritage sites. And what we found was people really struggling with that. And by bringing it all together, actually it gives them the ability to kind of go, where do we target? In some schools it's the bursar, in some schools it's the headmaster, in some schools it's the head of year, in some schools it's the governor. So it is very much trying to get underneath those individual schools and what the right way is. So you're absolutely right, we don't ignore school governors. We will go wherever we're invited, or sometimes when we're not invited too.
I think it's better to go when you're not invited. Any further questions? I mean, thanks for that. I mean, I think that video brought it to life for us, and I'm a devotee of, you know, children reading. I think if you can read, the world is your oyster. I know from my own background that access to books through a library and learning to read opened up lots of opportunities for me, and I think it's something we would all encourage. So I think we're all very supportive of what's being done. I'm looking around, no one's disagreeing with me, and you know, thank the team, and let's hope we can increase the number of people taking up the service. Thanks, Inderjit. You've been very quiet, but thank you. We're now moving on to agenda item 11, which is the future of the Transitions Learning Programme, which is pages 61 to 74. I think you're introducing Inderjit, and you've got Paul Fleming, who's Head of Service Adult Learning, with you. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So hi everyone. So I'm going to open briefly and then hand over to Paul. But this report here is to ask Scrutiny to consider the proposed position of TLP, Transitional Learning Programme, and to comment on any views around our proposed consultation, which will be subject to Cabinet approval next month. So in brief, TLP is a service that is run by the Adult Learning Services within Adults and Communities Directorate. The provision and referrals and part of the funding for each student does come from Children's Services via the High Needs Block and the which is part of the DSG. The paper details the position of the service in relation to student numbers, financial position, and the staffing of the service. But in summary, the service is subject to a review due to the learner numbers and the financial position based on the current numbers and at full capacity as well. So the paper highlights the shortfall of funding which presents a risk to the service, hence the proposed service review and consultation. But Paul, I'll hand over to you to give a bit more detail. Any queries and comments from that?
Good afternoon all. Yeah, this is a a small but quite complex service. There's three learners within the programme. I think any programme with special educational needs is obviously very complex. So there's quite a long list of policies and legislation involved. I think most importantly, the SEND Code of Practice. We do have a duty as an authority around support for this cohort because of their profound and multiple needs, disabilities. So we are aware of the context as well in terms of what else is happening within SEND and the review, and working closely with colleagues in Children Family Service and SENA. The service itself is probably a legacy of the community learning days, community college days. The service was set up in 2005. It operates from a mobile at Rawlins Academy, and in terms of the way it's moved into our area of responsibility, when the service was centralised and taken on by the council, we brought the staffing with and that service area with us. So in terms of the current cohort, yeah, I mentioned there's three learners, all with EHCPs, Educational Healthcare Plans. We have ceased enrolments, so we're suspended enrolments for the current period because of the review of the service. In terms of, I won't go into too much detail on the service delivery model, other than to say that the condition of the building is in very poor condition. It is a one of these mobile classrooms, which is in a poor state of repair. So that's one of the reasons we're needing to look at the future of the service. In terms of the financial model, from section 22, the challenge we have is the rising costs and cuts to funding. So there has been a change to element 3 funding. That changed from £23 to £15, 67 per hour. And the service is currently not operating within its generated income. So we're expecting an overspend this year of £143,000, and even looking at the future options for the service, running at full capacity, there is still a gap in terms of the funding position. So the point we're at now is looking at taking this out to consultation and consulting with service users and other agencies, carers, parents, on the future of the service and different options. The proposal is to take this to Cabinet on the 9th, and there's a timetable set out in section 45. The plan will be to go into the consultation soon after a decision's been made or approval at Cabinet.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Joe?
Just a quick one on this one. I can understand it's limited in the scope of impact of the people, limited at the number of people, but the impact on those people is profound, as in they're getting one-to-one and a lot of services. Let's fast forward and just say, no decision made, but just say this service provision wasn't provided. What would be the service provision for, what would the alternative be, basically?
Yeah, in terms of other providers, the councils, this service is quite unique in that it's the only service that I know of that's delivered in-house. The council commissions specialist schools, FE colleges and private providers to provide that continuing service, and we have a duty to do that. So, whatever decision that comes out into the consultation, there would be that continuing support through those different routes.
So my follow-on question would be then, if there is a continuation, why have we paused subscription, or why have we paused people accessing the service?
The decision to cease taking enrolments this time was due to mainly due to that continuity of service for the service users. So any situation where you've got a change in the service to the learning pathway, there's the social relationships between the learners, can be disruptive. So we were very mindful of that, and actually it wouldn't necessarily help those people in that, those young people, vulnerable people in that situation.
Sorry, Chair.
Barry. Oh, sorry.
Just before to put that thought on, and this is the politician in me, is that if we've paused it because we think there's going to be disruption in their learning, haven't we prejudged to say actually that route that they're potentially taking isn't going to be there whenever it withdraws? So we've actually made the decision not to carry on with the service.
Yeah, just quickly on that. So just to be clear, the current learners in the service are still receiving the service, so there's no pause in their kind of educational journey. Is that what you're referring to, the new people coming in? So any new people, so the reason for kind of halting on referrals coming in, so everyone would still have an EHCP kind of through their own process. If their educational journey means that they require an educational service, then they are still eligible for that service, so they will still go elsewhere. So we're not saying you were down for TLP, but you can't come. Essentially, the authority still has a duty to provide educational services to that person, so they will still continue to get an educational service elsewhere.
Thank you, Chair. I'll leave you at that. Thank you.
Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the recommendation is for us to comment on the proposals. Well, there's not really anything to comment on. It's yes or no. Do you go ahead with something? But going back to, say, item 34, where you're saying you'll seek the views of service users, etc. Well, service users are going to obviously say we want to continue. So are you going to be able to elaborate more in the consultation to give them options or give them ideas of which way it could go forward? Because we haven't got that in front of us now to comment on, but will they have something in front of them? Because otherwise all you're going to get back is we want to carry on, and they're not actually then given the chance to interact and say, but if you're offering this instead, actually that's quite a good idea, but you won't know that unless you...
No, thank you for that. Absolutely, in terms of the consultation, we've got to share what we're consulting on in terms of options, and so we would be expanding on that. It would be looking at the option of accessing other commissioned providers that are already out there, and asking what impact that would have on the service users, the carers, and other people involved and affected.
Thanks. Just before I bring Nick in, we've raised this on the committee several times, that where we're considering going for a consultation, it would always be useful for this committee to see a draft of what that consultation looks like, for the point that Barry's made. Otherwise, how can we comment on what the consultation might be if we haven't seen a draft of one? Now, I appreciate we tend to work the other way round, and we then wait for Cabinet to make a decision, by which time the consultation document's gone out without this committee getting a chance to look at it. So there must be a way, I would have thought, where this committee could see a draft of a proposed consultation, even if it might not be the final one, which either Cabinet agree to, or Cabinet might say, well, we're not doing one anyway and we're carrying on as we are. But I think that would make it more useful for us going forward, which I think is the point that Barry is very well making. Nick?
Thank you, Chair. You said that even if it was fully subscribed, it would still be costing money. When was the last time this service was fully subscribed?
The service, it would have been in the last academic year, 7 learners fully subscribe at that point. There has been the changes to the income have happened since that point, but we were already looking at that particular stage at the finances because of some of the challenges around the situation on the financial viability.
Just a quick one for me, looking at paragraph 17, where it says we've got 1 full-time person and 10 part-time people. If we're only, so are the part-timers given different hours depending on the number of people in the service, or do they get the same number of hours irrespective of whether we got 3, 7 or none? I didn't quite understand. So it seems an awful lot of people, I mean 11 people to provide a service to 3 individuals.
Yes, very good question. In terms of the capacity and that capacity question, the service has continued to run at capacity for a number of years. This year, because of the situation and ceasing the enrolments, there is additional challenges on the financial situation, but the staffing has been reduced, but there is also the consultation and that management of that resource. Certainly specialist staff coming in to support, caring in that situation. It's trying to get the balance right. So yeah, the staffing has been pretty stable over a number of years, and if there was any, significant change to the model, would be adjusted accordingly.
Presumably you're thinking these staff have got some sort of contract which presumably guarantees them a minimum number of hours. So I just wonder what they're all currently doing.
Yeah, we've been using their skills because it relates very closely to other areas of adult learning. So some of them have been supporting other adult learning programs, whilst there's the capacity there.
Well, I think if I've just accept the comments, I think everybody's in favour of a consultation taking place, and just obviously with the caveats, it would be useful if this committee could just be sent a copy of the consultation should Cabinet make a decision to go that route, just so that we could have a look and feed anything back. I appreciate it might have gone out by then, but I think it's useful for the committee to see if that could be possible. Bill, sorry.
Just include in that consultation alternatives, what people could look at, the other choice of what they want to do, rather than just say start, finish. I don't know the point made before, but it's not needs to be recorded, Chair, I think.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Bill, is that the point that Jill made and was answered about what alternative provision is there. There clearly is an alternative provision. We just don't necessarily understand what that alternative provision is.
It needs to be stated in the consultation so people know what.
Yes. No, I take your point, and therefore we would understand what that alternative provision is, which others might be accessing at the moment because the service is paused. Yep, no. John?
Sorry, I was just going to suggest that we could send a copy of the consultation documents to committee members at the point that the Cabinet report is published, so that's at least a week before Cabinet, isn't it?
That would be excellent, John. Then we can feed anything in. So I think if any members have got any comments on the consultation, it would be, I think, appropriate to send a note to Christine and John. And then obviously they can take that information back to Cabinet. I mean, it's only our desire to assist Cabinet in making their decision for no other reason. So thank you for that. I think we're now on to the last agenda item, if I'm not mistaken, which is an update on community managed libraries, agenda item 12, pages 75 to 82. And Fran's back. So I'm not sure who's taking this one first. Who's introducing it? I
think Fran will just crack on with it.
Excellent. Cheers, Fran.
Thank you. I'm sorry, no video this time. So an update on our wonderful community managed libraries. So we have a network of 35 community managed libraries that was established in 2017. So the report just takes you through how those libraries have developed and a reminder of the support that's offered by the council. Our network is one of the largest community managed library networks in the country, and we do have a range of management models across the network. Most of them are charitable incorporated organisations, CIOs, and volunteer run. But there are some examples that are run by parish or town councils, and some do actually employ paid staff. Those are detailed in paragraphs 6 and 7 of your report. And also to point out that Mount Sorrel and Kirby Muxloe still operate under a licence with the County Council, because that's pending their completion of full transfer. I think in reality it's fair to say no one size fits all for community managed libraries, and the service works really hard with the support of colleagues in property and legal services to work with each group to support the model that works best in their community. The network does make a huge contribution to library access in Leicestershire. It provides just under 600 hours of access every week. And there's a huge variety across the network in terms of individual opening hours, but on average, each CML is open about 17 hours a week. Last year, all of the CMLs together issued 305,551 books, and just over 180,000 of those were junior issues. And they also received just under 8,000 new joiners. The CMLs were closed throughout the pandemic for quite a long time, so it is really positive to see those issue numbers having recovered to those pre-COVID levels. I won't go through the service offered, it's detailed in your report in paragraphs 1 to 15, and again varies to an extent across libraries, but all libraries give access to book stock, free public PCs and Wi-Fi. There's chargeable printing and photocopying facilities and a range of events that go on. And some community managed libraries have expanded their offer into cafes and warm spaces and hire out spaces for a variety of other activities. Each CML has a support agreement with the County Council, and that's detailed in paragraph 16 to 23. So it covers things like book stock, including reservations, access to professional library support. We provide a library hub that enables the volunteers to contact a member of council library staff during their opening hours for any queries or issues that might arise whilst they're working, so they can resolve those straight away. And we also provide free van delivery of all of their book stock and access to Section 106 funding that applies to that individual library. We also have a named support officer, and those support officers work really closely with the groups. They meet on a regular basis and provide lots of advice, and they work with their principal manager, and they carry out an annual review for every community managed library. And that's a really valuable opportunity to sit down, reflect on what's been achieved over the past year and celebrate, and also look at the business plan, including the financial accounts, and consider future plans so that we're working to kind of address any issues that might be coming on the horizon. We've included a couple of case studies in the report just to try and illustrate some of the diversity and impact of the network. That's paragraphs 25 and 26. But I think I'd just like to say all 35 community managed libraries make a positive impact, and we're really grateful for the dedication of the volunteers and trustees that are involved. Paragraphs 27 to 33 give you some financial context, and just to point out that whilst the core costs sit with the library service, there are other parts of the council that were involved, ensuring that those libraries run successfully and sustainably. Whilst the community managed libraries do work in smaller libraries than those that are managed by the County Council, so their costs overall tend to be lower, they are very reliant on the ongoing support of their communities, whether that's from providing the volunteers to run the service, to people coming in and using it, to people making donations or taking part in events to create income. So that's key to their sustainability. And just to conclude, the CMLs now have become an established community asset, and they do enable many of our Leicestershire residents to access library resources in their local community. And they're really well placed to respond to the needs of their local communities and maximise the assets available to them. I think every community managed library is very distinct, and it's important that we continue to be flexible in our support to them.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think I asked for this report, and because I think I was there at the beginning when we were discussing it, and I'll be the first one to put my hand up, and I thought they'd all fold in about 2 or 3 years. I was a doom and gloom merchant, but at least I'm honest about it. Yeah, really welcome the report. Really good, really positive that most have thrived and have been successful. And I want to echo our committee's probably thoughts about thanking the volunteers and everybody involved in sustaining the community libraries. Paragraph 9 is the only thing, about 17 hours. Maybe we can encourage and help and support them, those that want to grow their hours. It's really encouraging that one's open 41 hours or over 40 hours. That's really good. But if you're only open 7 hours, are you really providing a community service? Is the volunteer levels there? And maybe we can work on them. But yeah, they've been a success, I think, and maybe we can, look at that at other areas of adult social care, because I really did think most of them would be folded by now, and they haven't. So you've proven me wrong, so well done.
Thanks, Joel, for the honesty. I was on the optimistic side. I think one thing which is perhaps missed at points on the libraries, I think it's an excellent report. I think it's an excellent service. I think I agree totally with what Joel said about the thanks. But at a time when more and more residents are not offering their service for volunteering, I think the libraries, the community managed libraries, has provided a way for people to get back involved in their communities. So I think there has been a knock-on effect of that as well. In assisting other groups to actually perhaps attract volunteers they might not have otherwise done, because I think people can see it's been a success. So I think, to me, it's not just about the fact that the books go out the door and that they provide those facilities for people, but I think it also demonstrates to people a bit that we all care about, irrespective of party, that the more people we can get volunteering in our communities, the better and more thriving communities we have. And I think libraries have been a catalyst for that. So I think it's an excellent report. I think it's a superb service we provide. I think no one would disagree with that, and long may it continue. So thank you very much. All right, that was the last substantive item. So the date of the next meeting is the 4th of March 2024 at 2 p.m. Day before my birthday, if anyone wishes to bring me lots of cakes, or is it the other way around? I can never remember. There are no urgent items, so could I thank everybody for attending today's meeting. I thank anyone who's been sitting at home listening on YouTube. In fact, for all those who might watch it in the future. So with that, have a very pleasant remainder of the afternoon and a very good evening. Thank you all.